What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we are here to talk about Week 9 wide receivers, who you should be plugging into your lineup, and how you should be viewing these players here in this week's slate with some of the bye weeks, some of the injuries, some of the other stuff that we are dealing with right now. We're getting into the second half of the season, hopefully making those playoff pushes so we can win a championship here in 2025. But without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these wide receivers. All right, so as you can see, we got the tier maker pulled up on the screen. I got 7 tiers to get through all 36 wide receivers here in today's video. As always, the name that you are seeing on the left side of the screen at the top of the tier, that's how I'm viewing these players if you were plugging them into your lineup. So the guys at the very top, obviously, are the elite wide receiver ones, and the guys down below are more so those low-end wide receiver threes here this week. Let's just start it off in the top tier here at the elite wide receiver ones. I got 3 players in this tier. It's Puka, Nacua, Jamar Chase, and CeeDee Lamb. We don't got to talk too much about any of these players, really. Puka has been dominant every time that he's in the lineup here for the Rams. Jamar Chase has been peppered with targets with Joe Flacco. The only thing that I need to mention is that Joe Flacco is dealing with an AC joint sprain. That's the news that we got this morning. We're going to keep an eye on that. If he misses this game, we're going to move Jamar Chase down the rankings because obviously Joe Flacco is the reason why this offense has taken a uptick forward here in these last couple of weeks. CeeDee Lamb gets the Arizona Cardinals. Should be a good week for him as well. So I don't really need to waste too much time with those guys. Let's go to tier 2 because there is a couple other players in this tier. 5 players in the high-end wide receiver ones. It's Jaxon, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rashee Rice, Justin Jefferson, and then I have Odunze in this tier as well. Now, looking at this tier, again, not too much to talk about when it comes to these players. You have Jaxon, Amon-Ra, Rashee, even Justin Jefferson, all these players who've been very good for fantasy football. Obviously, Rashee just getting back and some of the other stuff, but there is a matchup that I want to talk about here. When I talk about some of these matchups today, we're going to talk about points above expectation and points below expectation. What that means is basically just how many points that defense is giving up compared to the projection that those players are having in your fantasy lineup. So for example, if Justin Jefferson was projected 15 points and that team is giving up 3 points above the expectation, on average he's scoring about 18. So hopefully that makes sense. That's what we're going to talk about today when it comes to the matchups. And Justin Jefferson is the player that I want to talk about there because he plays on the road at Detroit. It is a good matchup. They are ranked 28th against the wide receiver position, giving up 3.8 points above the expectation. So should be an opportunity for Justin Jefferson to get back in a groove here. You do have JJ McCarthy back in the lineup, so it may have a little bit of growing pains here with him still trying to develop for the Vikings, but still think he's going to be a top play for me, still a top 10 guy in my rankings. Now moving on to tier 3, those are going to be the low end wide receiver ones, and I got 5 guys in this tier as well. It's going to be Michael Pittman Jr., I have Drake London, Davante Adams, George Pickens, and Lad McConkey in this tier as well. 2 main matchups I want to talk about here. It's with Michael Pittman and Drake London. Michael Pittman, he plays on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers are 31st against the wide receiver position right now, giving up 6.9 fantasy points above the expectations, so should be a really good opportunity for Pittman to keep stacking. He's been very good this year with Daniel Jones. I think right now, top 10 play in my rankings. Drake London also has a good matchup on the road at the New England Patriots. You have Christian Gonzalez over there, but they still are 27th against the wide receiver position, giving up 2.9 fantasy points above the expectation, so should be another opportunity for Drake London to hopefully have a better week. Obviously, he missed last week, so we need to get him into the lineup this week, and it's a decent matchup for him to potentially give us some top 10 numbers. Now, moving on to my tier 4, I do have this as the high-end wide receiver 2s. I got a total of 6 wide receivers in this tier. So we are going to kick it off at 14. That's going to be Jalen Waddle, followed by DK Metcalf, Marvin Harrison Jr., Zay Flowers, Nico Collins, and Teteroa McMillan. That is the entire tier. Tons and tons of matchups to talk about here. Basically, everybody has a matchup worth noting. Jalen Waddle plays against the Baltimore Ravens. This is Thursday Night Football. It's a good matchup for him. Right now, Baltimore is ranked 29th against the fantasy football wide receiver position, giving up 4 points above the expectations, so he should be able to have a decent week here this week. DK Metcalf also has a good matchup, playing against Indianapolis, who's ranked 30th against the wide receiver position, giving up 5.7 fantasy points above the expectation, so an even better matchup for him. Now, the best matchup on the slate this week, Marvin Harrison Jr. on the road at Dallas, Monday Night Football. Dallas is ranked dead last, giving up 10.8 fantasy points above the expectation, so Marvin Harrison Jr., it's been an up and down year. Hasn't been that sophomore breakout that we've wanted to see so far. This is going to be a smash matchup for him to potentially take advantage of. We saw Troy Franklin do it last week when we targeted him in the Stash Week episode. So I do think Marvin has a great opportunity here to have a big game. And if you're debating on whether or not you should plug him into your lineup, I think the answer is just plug him into your lineup here this week. He's a top 16 play for me. Now, two players do have bad matchups in this tier. It's going to be Zay Flowers on the road at Miami. That's the Thursday night football game as well. Like I said, right now, Miami is ranked 7th, giving 3.5 fantasy points below the expectation to the wide receiver group. So it's not necessarily the best matchup for him and a very tough matchup for Nico Collins. However, I'm going to put an asterisk next to that because right now, Denver first against the fantasy football wide receiver position, giving up 7.1 fantasy points below the expectation. So it's been very good against wide receivers. However, Pat Surtain not going to be playing in this game. IR candidate there for the Denver Broncos. So you do think that that's probably a little bit better than what it shows on paper for Nico Collins. Going on to tier 5, that is my low end wide receiver 2s. I got 7 wide receivers in this tier. Starting it off with Keenan Allen at 20. I got Chris Olave at 21. Brian Thomas Jr. at 22. 23 is T. Higgins. 24, Stephon Diggs. 25, Travis Hunter. And 26 is Cortland Sutton to round out the tier. Again, plenty of matchups to talk about here. You have Chris Olave on the road at the Los Angeles Rams. It is a good matchup on paper. They're ranked 25th against the wide receiver position, giving up 2.5 fantasy points above the expectation. So should be a decent opportunity for him to kind of overperform the expectations or the projections that you have there in your fantasy football league. Also, Brian Thomas Jr. at the Las Vegas Raiders this week. Good matchup for him. 2.6 fantasy points above the expectation, ranked 26th in the NFL. That's going to apply to Travis Hunter as well there. And then you have 2 bad matchups here. It's going to be Stephon Diggs against the Atlanta Falcons. They are currently top 5 against wide receivers, giving up 4.5 fantasy points below the expectation here for wide receivers. So a little bit of a tougher matchup for Stephon Diggs, definitely moving him down my rankings because of the matchup just a tiny bit. And the same thing can be said for Cortland Sutton. He gets to play on the road at the Houston Texans. Right now, they're ranked 2nd against wide receivers. 6.8 fantasy points below the expectation is what they're usually giving up. So it's going to be a little bit of a tougher matchup for Cortland Sutton as well. And if you look at how Troy Franklin has played over the last 2 weeks, he's kind of eating into that target share a little bit for Cortland Sutton. Not that Cortland Sutton is somebody we should be worried about, but it does seem he's going to be a little bit more dependent maybe on a touchdown here in this game against the Texans. Let's go to tier 6. Those are the high-end wide receiver 3s, and I only have 4 players in this tier. It's going to be Xavier Worthy, Jordan Addison, DJ Moore, and Deebo Samuel. Pretty decent tier. There's definitely a lot of upside in this tier potentially. The only matchup worth noting in this tier is going to be that matchup for Jordan Addison, like I said, with Justin Jefferson. Detroit is ranked 28th against the wide receiver position, giving up 3.8 fantasy points above the expectation, so it should be an opportunity for Jordan Addison to potentially keep stacking upon his weeks that he's had over the last couple of them. He's looked pretty good ever since coming back from suspension, so I think he's a player that definitely is still going to remain involved in this offense and still has some pretty sneaky upside pretty much each and every week, especially if he can get into the end zone. But again, that's going to come with, some development from JJ McCarthy. Let's go to tier 7. This is the final tier for me. It's going to be the low end wide receiver 3s. I got a total of 6 players in this tier. At 31, Wandell. At 32, Khalil Shakir. Jamison Williams, Romeo Doubs, Quentin Johnston, and then at 36, Juwan Jennings. Only 2 players that I really want to talk about the matchups right now. Shakir has a matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, who are ranked 3rd against the wide receiver position, giving up 5.9 fantasy points below the expectation. So a tough matchup here for Khalil Shakir. We always expect a shootout between Mahomes and Josh Allen, but these are 2 pretty decent defenses, especially when you consider the Kansas City side of the ball. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a, grinder type of game here in this one. Definitely going to be a very fun game to watch, though. Still, this wide receiver core is probably going to struggle against Kansas City if Kansas City keeps playing the same way that they have throughout the beginning of the year this far. Now, the other matchup that I want to talk about is Romeo Doubs. Romeo Doubs is a player who has a bad matchup versus Carolina this week. They're ranked 6th against the wide receiver position, giving up 3.6 fantasy points below the expectation. So Doubs, we know with the emergence of Christian Watson last week, Tucker Kraft, you still have guys like Matthew Golden, a bunch of guys in this offense. It's going to be boom bust for everybody. It's hard to project who's going to be who. I think Romeo Doubs is the most reliable of those targets right now from a target share standpoint. However, like I said, tougher matchup for him. Still going to be a little bit hard to project this offense. And Romeo Doubs comes in for me as a low-end wide receiver 3 and probably he is the only wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers that is cracking my top 36. All right, so there you have it. That is my top 36 wide receivers as we head into week 9. Obviously, lots of injury reports still going to be happening throughout the week. Today is just the first day that some of those start coming out. So make sure you guys are subscribed subscribe to the channel. That way you don't miss any of the future content. Plenty of content coming your way. Q&As, stash videos, waiver videos, all of that good stuff. Trade videos, everything you need. We got you covered here at the League FFB. If you found something today informative, entertaining, and or actionable, do me the favor and hit that like button. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. And go join our free Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description, helping you guys with those fantasy football teams 24/7, 365. But with all that out of the way, I have nothing else for you guys today. So I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.